Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone is doing just fine. Today, thank you so much for joining Erie's Developmental Phases Summer Learning Blitz 2022. I am Jennifer Snapp. I am a literacy consultant at Wayne Risa, and back channeling for me is my colleague, Judy Bowling. So I am going to shut off the gallery view so that I can just share my screen with you. And if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat and Judy will call your name. If you have a question, I'll pause every now and then for questioning. So thank you again for coming today, and I hope that you stay engaged. Thank you. The promotion of social, emotional, and academic learning is not a shifting educational fad. It is the substance of education itself. And so today, again, as I said before, we're looking at Erie's developmental phases. And we also want to think about the whole child in whatever we are doing, because the whole child is important. We have to think about their social emotional aspects, in addition to their academics, their physical well-being, the family engagement, their community involvement, how their nutrition plays a role, their health, all of this plays a role in the whole child. So we want to be mindful of that in our teaching. So again, the whole child is our focus. So today we have our agenda for today is our working agreements, our purpose, and our teacher vocabulary. And Judy soon will drop a link in to give you the vocabulary. Then we're going to look at Erie's phases, and then we're going to have some reflections and questions. Okay. So let's look at our working agreements today. Please stay engaged in humble inquiry and commit to being present, and which means including taking care of yourself and your community, your family, or whoever is surrounding you. Share and harvest knowledge. I don't like to say I borrowed. I just say I'm harvesting knowledge because it's something that I'm going to use again. It's going to be the fruits of your labor. And then take a learner's stance. The purpose of today's PD is to review Erie's 4 phases of word reading recognition and development to engage and support students in mastering alphabetic principles. So here we have a lot of vocabulary. I'm not going to go over all of the vocabulary because it's like 3 slides. But again, Judy can drop a link in, and that's going to give you access to some of the vocabulary that you may hear today, such as morpheme and morphology and decoding. And so I'm just going to go ahead and scroll through, and you can take a look and just see if anything resonates with you that you've heard before or not. I do want to talk about graphemes, though, which are letters or a letter combination that spells a phoneme. And we all know this, we've seen it before, such as E, EI, EIG, IGH. And then we have orthography, which is the writing system for representing language. And then we have orthographic mapping, the mental process that is used to store words for immediate and effortless retrieval. And it requires phonemic awareness, letter sound knowledge, and the mechanism for sight word learning. And so this is our 3rd slide for our vocabulary. And we'll talk a little bit about phoneme, phonemic awareness, phoneme grapheme. And then we have some more teacher vocabulary, phonics, and phonological awareness. So again, if you're just joining us, Judy is going to drop in a link where you'll have access to the vocabulary that I just went over. And if you're just joining, welcome again. So first of all, I just want to talk about 3 frameworks here. So the first one is a simple view reading, which you'll see at the very top of the screen. Word recognition times language comprehension equals reading comprehension. It is the product of word recognition and language comprehension, also known as the simple view of reading. And then to the right, or I should say to the left of my screen, as students begin recognizing words by sight, it depends on developing an understanding of how letters and sounds are connected. And this is our hourglass figure. And then to the right of the screen, we have a third model, which is fluent reading, which is a complex mental activity dependent on specific circuits in the language and visual areas of the brain, as shown in the four-part processing model for word recognition. So when we think about Erie's phases, all of this plays a role in how children learn how to read. I do want to go back to the hourglass model for a minute. And if you notice in the very top, in the orange section, it says for early phonological awareness, they began to learn syllables, alliterations, onset rhyme, and then the basic knowledge is phoneme blending, phoneme segmentation, where they sound the words out. And then advanced would be phoneme deletion, substitution, and reversal, where they're actually, substituting letters or taking letters out, sounds out, and being able to recognize that. And then at the bottom of the hourglass, this is how they make those connections to letters and sounds. And so we pull in graphemes and digraphs and trigraphs and vowel teams and so on. So now here we're in word reading development. So the ability to recognize many words by sight during fluent reading depends on phonemic awareness and the ability to map phonemes and graphemes. So they have to be able to map sounds to writing. Alphabetic learning requires progressive differentiation of both the sounds and words and the letter sequences that are in print. And phonemic awareness is the foundation upon which letter-sound association can be constructed. So I don't know your ages, but if you're in my generation, back then, a lot of times children were taught the ABCs in a song fashion, ABC, D, and so forth. Well, what we found is that, or I should say what researchers found, children really didn't know their alphabet. They were just memorizing the letters. And so they have to be able to not just say those letters, identify the sounds, and then match to the print as well. Okay, thank you. So let's look at the four phases. Erie's four phases. The first one is pre-alphabetic. If you are familiar with this, you'll know that it has incidental visual cues, general concepts of print. In the pre-alphabetic phase, they may know just a few letters. They may know a sound or two, but not much. In the early alphabetic phase, they begin to know their letter sounds and letter names and some letter sounds. And it's also the early phonological phonemic awareness stage. And you have the syllable and the onset rhyme and some initial phoneme matching. But then in the later alphabetic phase, students begin to start an automatic sight word recognition, maybe the smaller words, some maybe larger words, irregular, and some irregular words. They have initial set of phoneme and grapheme correspondences and basic phonemic awareness. They begin segmenting and blending words that have multi-syllables and so multisyllabic. And then in the consolidated alphabetic phase, students increasingly begin to have that automatic sight word recognition with regular and irregular words. And then they also have the orthographic mapping. So they are starting to write and making connections with those word families and syllable patterns and morphemes. And they become more advanced in their phonemic awareness and deleting and substituting. And then, of course, like I said earlier, reversing those phonemes. So here, let's dig a little deeper into the pre-alphabetic phase characteristics. This is where children may memorize words because of their appearance within contexts such as cereal boxes or street signs. They may not understand that the letters represent speech sounds. So their letter formation and writing are not clearly formed. But, sometimes parents, they may not be aware of this, of course. And so if their child says stop, when they get to a stop sign, they get excited and they say, oh, my child knows how to read. No, they have just figured out that, you may have said a few times to them, oh, we're going to stop here. So they recognize the color, maybe the shape of the sign. And so we call that logographic or an incidental visual cue. And just like the Cheerio boxes. No, they can't read Cheerios. They just know that box, that's where the Cheerios are. So here we see how a child reads familiar words, rote to learning, or incidental visual features. How does a child read unfamiliar words? They guess. It's constrained by context or memory of a text. And then what are some other indicators? It depends on the context. So it may be few words, it may be some errors or confusion, and they cannot read the text. And then here at the bottom, I need to move this. All right, and then with spelling, they begin to string letters together. To assign meanings without representing sounds or words. It's amazing as educators when we read our students' papers. Sometimes we look and it's like, okay, I can actually read this even though the letters are not making actual words, but we figure it out because we know our students and we know how they're trying to put those sounds together to create a word. So at the bottom, there is a picture of what you may see with a child who is trying to spell in the pre-alphabetic phase. It may make no sense at all, but eventually they begin to figure it out. So now let's go into the next phase, which is the alphabetic principle. These are letters that represent speech sound. It's essential for learning to read and to spell, and that's the alphabetic principle. The concept is that you have words that are made up of individual speech sounds, and then the goal here is to have automatic retrieval of words. So it is essential for students to begin learning to read and spell. And they have to understand that those words are made up of individual sounds. So for example, we have the say bat. So it's bat. And when they start hearing that, you want them to write it down. So when you say b, you want them to write the B down, and the they have to eventually write down the A and then T. And then they say the word that. And then it becomes automatic retrieval because they have a lot of practice with this. So you have the sound identification, the sound symbol association, and the simple word recognition, pictures, and mouth gestures. So I know during COVID, teachers were concerned because students could not see their mouths. And so I will often tell them, you have to wear a clear visor so that students can see the formation of your mouth. And you have to kind of socially distance if they were in face to face so that they could see how the students were forming their mouths, the articulation gestures. So at the bottom of the screen, you have two pictures where you have B, where there are no teeth showing. And so students have to learn this. If I'm saying B, I am pinching my lips together. And if I'm saying V as in victory, then I'm going to see some teeth. And so this is a quick check for teachers to see if your students are articulating the sounds correctly, the letter sounds correctly, because you're going to also look at their mouths. And one strategy you can use here is to have the students, you can buy little mirrors for them or one big mirror and have them stand in front of the mirror or sit in front of the mirror and look at how their mouths are formed when they are saying their letters. And so here are just some pictures for you so you can get an idea. I use bat, but you have an example on the screen for ball. All right, so let's take a look at the early alphabetic reading and spelling. So in this phase, we have to think about how a child reads familiar words. So they have partial use of their letter sound correspondence, and they have that initial sound and salient consonants. So for example, you have FER, and it equals FISH. So they may be able to identify the first sound, which is F, or the first letter, I should say, is F, and the sound is F, but they may not be able to identify the ending sounds. So, but this is the first stage. Also, you want to look at how a child reads unfamiliar words, which is constrained by context. And it gets the first sound, and then they begin to guess. If you look at the segmenting words, saying each sound that you hear is what I was talking about on the last screen. So here we have hat, and you have the little, I forget what you call these things, the little buttons, I'm gonna call them buttons, and you have them slide it in a box every time they say and hear that sound. And then eventually you can begin writing, but this is the beginning stages of segmenting words. And some other indicators, again, they begin confusing similar appearing words. So those words like house, horse, and how, because they all start with HO. So students, that might be confusing to them. And in spelling, it represents a few salient sounds, such as beginning and ending consonants, which fill in other letters randomly, and then they know some letters names for those sounds. So again, you want to look at the 4-part processing system. And here you have the content processor, and then the meaning processor. And then at the bottom of this model, you will see the phonological processor, and then the orthographic processor. So the sound, and then it ends up they can write. And then they eventually become more fluent with these words. All right, now for the alphabetic principle. This is where your students are learning common spelling for each. And again, you see how I have the little, I'll call them coins this time, the coins in the box. And then you have the hat. And again, you sound it out, you spell it, and then you look for all the letters in the simple word, and it's cyclical here. Spell, habit, and then sound. H-A-T. And eventually they begin to write those letters out. And then you go to the next word. So you can begin the substitution here. So you can remove the H and perhaps put a B there or put a C there. Then you can go to the N sounds, and you can do the same thing with that letter substitution. And then again, we have the later alphabetic reading and writing, kind of the same thing here. You have more pronunciation of your whole words on the basis of complete phoneme graphing, mapping. Students are able to use full use of the phoneme graphing correspondence, and they are blending their sounds from left to right. And a lot of times they begin to use the analogy to known patterns. And then some of your other indicators is rapid, is unitized reading of whole familiar words. And you begin to see some increase here. And then with the spelling, it is phonetically accurate, and they are beginning to incorporate those conventional letter sequences and patterns, and sight word knowledge is beginning to increase. All right, so here, the alphabetic principle, sight vocabulary develops. So the instruction aim is to decode those words, make it fast and accurate for word recognition and spelling. So they should be able to identify, kind of like sight words. It should be fast. And then that sight vocabulary, as I was saying, you're instantly and effortlessly recognizing those words. Whether it's regular or irregularly spelled words. And then they have a comprehension. They actually know what the word means. So I have a little icon on the side: save, spend, donate. Okay, and then you have an entrance. So that entrance is that they're building their vocabulary. And as they build that vocabulary, they're able to write it, and they're able to write sentences, and 2 sentences, eventually a paragraph. So as they are beginning to put all this together, just stick with it. Be encouraging when you're using those small groups. Make sure that you're incorporating this writing, all these different stages for your students so that they can build those skills. Right, and let's look at this one, the Consolidated Alphabetic, reading and spelling. So here we want to look, I'm going to ask someone else to come off mic and talk about, or read, I should say, how a child reads familiar words in the Consolidated Alphabetic stage. And this typically happens between second and third grade.
I can do that.
Thank you. And what is your name?
Cheryl.
Hi, Cheryl. Thank you so much.
How a child reads familiar words. Reads variously by phonemes, syllabic units, morpheme units, and whole words.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yes. You want me to read the rest or no?
Yeah, sure.
How a child reads unfamiliar words. Sequential and hierarchical decoding, notices familiar parts first, reads by analogy to similar known words. Other indicators, remembers multisyllabic words, analogize, analyzes easily associated word structure with meaning, and spelling is word knowledge, including language of origin, morphemes, syntactic role, ending rules, prefix, suffix, and root forms.
Yes. So you see in second and third grade, we definitely want to start focusing on those affixes so that students can take those words and build, bigger words, and they have to understand the meanings of the prefixes and the suffixes. If you look at the different graphics that are on the page, you can see to the right, it says, when we know a word, we usually know three things about it. We know how to spell it, we know how it sounds, we know the meaning of the word. So when students can do those three things, then you know they have comprehended that word, and now they're able to use it in a sentence. They're able to write it out. They're able to explain it to you. They may even be able to draw a picture. They should be able to draw a picture of it at this stage. They begin to map symbols very easily to the sounds that they hear. And they also, their vocabulary increases greatly. So we want them to get as many words as they can in their vocabulary so that they can speak fluently and write fluently and read fluently with comprehension. This is going to be an easy group.
Yeah, no questions at this time.
Okay. The alphabetic principle is accurate and fluent reading and writing. It's systematic teaching, and it has the entire sound symbol or the correspondence system, and it's spelling, systematic decoding, and spelling instruction. And then you have fluent readers. So I know some of you might be saying, well, I don't have fluent readers. Well, we have to build upon this as our students are growing. So in pre-K, as you all know, they come with, a lot of students don't come with a lot of knowledge about reading and writing. And so it just scaffolds from one grade level to the next, so that by the time they hopefully get into fourth and fifth grade, they are very fluent readers and writers and spellers. Okay. It is now 4:00. And so I have enjoyed you. Thank you so much for those of you who were engaging in the chat, and thank you for coming off of the mic. And I hope that you have a wonderful a prosperous school year, and that there's lots of learning and progress with your students. Thank you so much. Have a great evening.